Hey guys, this is Chase of csjoseph.life, and doing another episode for Season 14. This is Season 14, Episode 16, which means it is the final episode of the Season 14 second series. Second series is focusing on pedagogue relationships, and this is the final episode for pedagogue relationships before we go into the direction of bronze pairs, which is coming up next. I would like to state that we are not doing silver pairs, actually. The reason why is I realize that I've already done them. I actually did them, I believe it's in Season 8. Season 8 is silver pairs, and it's already publicly available. So I'm not going to bother doing it because it's already there, and even though it's not entirely on a relationship slant or sexuality or intimacy slant, etc., all of the same principles that are talked about in Season 8 directly apply they directly apply. So get educated and go check it out. Now, remember guys, pedagogue relationships. What are pedagogue relationships for? Pedagogue relationships are extremely important, and they are my most personal favorite relationship out there. Although I will admit that some of my negative exposure to INTJs recently, and then now some of my recent training that I've taken in terms of relationships and relationship management, and generally helping people out, and a lot of books that I've read, I've come to the conclusion that while golden pairs are so amazing, and golden pairs, have the highest highs and lowest lows, they're definitely something worth to go for. But pedagogue relationships are dope AF. Like, let me tell you, they are so dope. Yeah, okay, sure, you might have some emotional compatibility issues, but sexually, they're amazing. Like, I'm telling you, it's like highest sexual compatibility. How could you say no to that? You know what I'm saying? So the point is, take advantage of the pedagogue relationship. Plus, the lack of the emotional compatibility actually can take you places. It can seriously take you places because it can actually grow you and the other person to develop emotional skills and decision-making skills that you didn't have previously. It's like you're taking advantage of camaraderie in a different way, right? Because remember, what are the benefits of camaraderie? And this is heavily discussed in the Ruby conference, which eventually became the Cutting Edge with CSJ show, which is probably my favorite show to do every month. It's a great show. It's like a podcast in of its own right. In fact, I might actually migrate it into a podcast specifically, just so that, and we'll make it privately available, a private podcast, but we'll see. Anyway, we've discussed camaraderie heavily on Cutting Edge, and camaraderie is very important. It's absolutely important because you utilize camaraderie to provide challenge to yourself and others so that you and others can become stronger. That's where your mentors come from. That's where your teachers come from. That's how you learn because they have the same cognitive functions you do, your 4 camaraderie types within your own quadra, right? So like if you're an ESFP, you're part of the Wayfarer quadra, so all of the Wayfarers would be the ones that you should be going to for teaching. Because if they have the same cognitive functions that you do, older Wayfarers would have, had to deal with the same, what do you call it? They would have had to deal with the same life problems that you have, right? And they would have had to have, succeed and get past those obstacles. So they're the best people to go to for that advice. You'd be better off doing that instead of spending money on some rando INFJ counselor who's just going to be affiliative and buy the book, and buy the book only helps like maybe one of the 16 types, not the rest. Maybe up to 4 of the 16 types because it targets a specific quadra, the philosopher quadra. So it's really just some regurgitation of, bullshit in my opinion. No offense to you therapists out there. But I honestly think Jungian behavioral therapy from Jungian analytical psychology is far more effective of a tool in reaching people. That being said, understand that, pedagogue relationship ends up having that huge advantage, of bringing camaraderie within the emotional area within the relationship. at least within the intimate relationship, you can rely on amazing sex. And that's great because, oftentimes when couples have problems, they just take those problems to the bedroom and they solve it in the bedroom and it's no issue. Well, it's no different with a pedagogue relationship. In fact, it's something that I heavily support and recommend heavily. Please do. Have sex often, very, very often. And because it's highest compatibility with sexuality, you can also get to the highest heights sexually with one another. Your level of sexual intimacy is the same as the golden pair, and you could go really, really far with your passion and your affection, more so than you can other relationships. But the lack of emotional compatibility ends up presenting a challenge. But that challenge has, some negative aspects and it has some positive aspects. The negative aspects is that, you're more prone to anger and potentially getting upset at each other, really frustrated with each other, labeling each other, competing with each other. It can lead to conflict within the relationship. However, the positive aspect is that you end up growing emotional skills that you didn't have previously. You end up becoming a better person. You end up being on the fast track to cognitive integration, also known as enlightenment, right? Enlightenment according to Carl Jung at least, or according to C.S. Joseph, but I don't really care that much about that or my name. I just want to get this out there. Hashtag truth, folks. So, super important, right? Well, that's what you do. That's how you handle it. You have to realize that there is a huge benefit to having that conflict because you have the highest opportunity for personal growth. The pedagogue relationship means that they are your pedagogue, that they are your teacher, and that they teach you things. So it's always going to be pretty good. You always are good at gathering information with each other. You guys are always good at sharing things with each other and sharing everything with each other. It's just that emotionally, you may not have your emotional needs met, and that is a problem. Now imagine being in an opposite relationship like this where your emotional needs are met, but your sexual needs aren't met at all, right? That would kind of be, a shit show. Like, think about it. Do you really, honestly, would you rather have a really bad sexual relationship and a really good emotional relationship? So it's like you have some emotional affair with somebody on the internet, and then all of a sudden that's really important to you? No, it's not. No, it's not. In the long run, it's not sustainable. You can sustain a relationship on great sex. Most people think I'm crazy when I'm saying that, but look at the statistics. Look at people's dating and mating habits. Really, at the end of the day, sexuality is primary, while emotions and emotionality, I guess, or whatever, emotionalism, or people's feelings or their emotional needs being met versus sexual needs, emotional needs come second to sexual needs. That's just reality. And that's true because all you have to do is interview somebody who's had an arranged marriage. Oh, they're really alike. They should get married. I'm sorry, but people, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, literally have no clue what they're doing. They hire these matchmakers to help them out, and those matchmakers are also following these stupid traditional ways, and determining who's compatible with who and which child should be married to who and how that goes and get me the dowry and all this stuff. And it's yeah, no. It doesn't help. It's not appropriate. It's not fun. So, as a result, a lot of people end up being insanely ignorant about compatibility when it comes to sexual relationships. But regardless of that, at least the pedagogue has some severe advantages if you can get over the one disadvantage, basically. The only one disadvantage. So, when it comes to ESFPs and ISTJs, it's no different, and these issues are consistent, throughout history, right? So typically, the ESFP is looking for someone who's, going to stick around, someone who is always going to give them freedom of choice, and that's the most important thing to an ESFP. And also to the ISTJ. The ISTJ is going to be looking for someone that makes them feel safe, make them comfortable. Look for someone who is capable to perform things that the ISTJ is not comfortable in performing, and how important that is as well. I think that's pretty important, right? That's very important to them. Now, however, some of the obstacles that they end up facing together, like they probably hit it off right away, had amazing sex right off the bat, everything was perfect, and then all of a sudden, a little bit of competition came in. So both these types end up placing each other's value system over the other. Both these types end up placing their own personal status over the other. And that's a serious problem. It's always been a serious problem between these types within a relationship. And it really comes from the fact that their extroverted thinking and their introverted feeling are both competing for the positions that they're in within the relationship. Because naturally, the human brain or the human mind, the human soul, the psyche, is predisposed to having people. It's predisposed to making sure that there's one FI user, one TE user in a relationship, versus and they're in a relationship with a TIFE user, right? There's two extroverted thinkers and two introverted feelers. There ain't any FE there. It's like the FI parent of an ESFP trying to get the FE trickster of the ISTJ to actually notice them, to actually make them feel better. And then the ESFP gets raging upset when it's like, wow, you don't think that highly of me, so why do I even bother? And it ends up causing the ESFP to get super mega depressed when that happens. Or on the ISTJ side, they're like, wow, you don't think very highly of me, you must not want me anymore. So then the ISTJ becomes disloyal and doesn't stick around anymore, or doesn't give attention to the ESFP anymore. And the ESFP's number one need is attention, other than, of course, having freedom of choice. Freedom of choice is first, so then the second highest need, I guess, is attention. And the ISTJ will start withholding attention from the ESFP, which will cause the ESFP to have absolutely zero motivation within the relationship. And then as a result, it completely falls apart. Complete catastrophic failure within the context of the relationship. So all of these things are obstacles, huge obstacles as to how this relationship works and all of the different challenges that they would face, right? So with that being said, how do you deal with that? How do you get around the fact that the ESFP is so childish with what other people think of them and how they live and breathe off of getting credit, right? Or the fact that the ISTJ is going out of their way to make themselves feel good at all times. They live and breathe their value system, their philosophy, how they feel about things. And the ISTJ often feels that the ESFP looks down on their value system, saying, well, mine's value system is better than yours because yours is childish, and I'm responsible with my value system. Or conversely, the ISTJ looks down on the ESFP. It's like, wow, you're such a little kid trying to go after all the credit every time. You care about you're so childish about your status, but I'm responsible with my status. I'm willing to let go of my status for the greater good at sometimes, but you're not willing to. You're selfish. You're entitled. And it ends up just becoming a total mess. And they end up losing the relationship. They end up losing each other in the process. Which really sucks if you think about it. It really, really sucks. So how do you get through this? Well, basically both types need to be willing to do the opposite of what they expect. That's really the key to their cognition when it comes to having a relationship. Because think about it. Your ego has the 4 cognitive functions in the ego. And your ego is used to using those 4 functions. But in order to meet each other's emotional needs, you have to go outside your ego. Which means you'd have to develop the neural pathways necessary to utilize those lower functions in a healthier manner via cognitive orbit, for example, to unlock those additional functions within your unconscious so that you can gain access to those additional mental abilities and those mental awarenesses so that you can provide those abilities and awarenesses for the sake of your partner. So knowing all this is pretty fundamental for the survival of this relationship, because as great as the sex is only going to get so far. It's only going to, they can only take their conflict to the bedroom for so long. 1, maybe 2 years, who knows, before it really ends up becoming a serious issue, right? And eventually, naturally, human beings over time in a pedagogue relationship can start to learn the emotional skills and the emotional abilities that are necessary in order to be a good steward of the relationship. But let me tell you, that's why Jungian analytical psychology exists, so that we could just have an easier time figuring out what people's emotional needs are, and then figuring out how we ourselves can provide those emotional needs, right? Super important. But most people are not even aware. They're not even aware of how that works or how relationships actually work in that capacity. So this is why I maintain, get educated. You need to get educated on this. So what do? Well, let's look at what the function stack of the ESFP versus the ISTJ actually is. Okay? So who has the highest extroverted feeling? Well, that is the ESFP, because they have FE critic, whereas the ISTJ has extroverted feeling trickster. So the person who's better at extroverted feeling just happens to be the ESFP, which means within the context of the relationship, the ESFP needs to take on the role of extroverted feeler, which means the ESFP needs to let their expectations go at the door for their emotional needs being met in terms of FE from the ISTJ. The ESFP's just kind of got to give up on that. The ESFP's just got to let go. It's not important. Dope glider. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's like maybe 50 feet away a second ago. It's about 150 feet away from now. And now a football field length. That's cool. Anyway. So the ESFP has to take on the roles and responsibilities of the FE user within the relationship. The ISTJ, however, let's look at TI. TI is something that TE child really absolutely needs. Well, the ISTJ has TI critic, whereas the ESFP has TI trickster. Therefore, it's the ISTJ's job in the relationship to become the TI user and provide logical thinking for the sake of the relationship. They have to be willing to say things like, "I think you're great," to the ESFP, even though it's really hard for an ISTJ to swallow their pride in that regard, because they have to be willing to say things, "I think you're great," and raise the status of the childish ESFP more than their own status. So the ISTJ will have to learn how to prioritize the status of the ESFP. And the ESFP will have to learn how to prioritize the feelings and the values of the ISTJ. If this doesn't happen, well, then the relationship's going to fall apart. But if it does happen, there are some amazing results. Some severely amazing results. Because guess what happens, guys? If one member of this relationship actually does this and actually pulls this off, guess what? Naturally, the other person is going to do it. Naturally, the other person is going to pull it off. Okay? Let's look at some examples. Okay? Because I'm trying to be as concrete here as I can, because we all know both these types are really concrete, and ESFPs have such a small attention span because they're SE hero. So it's hard for them to, keep track of this stuff. And thank you, ISTJs, for being very patient as we go through this. But at the same time, just be aware that Concrete examples, it's a little hard for me as an intuitive, as an ENTP. I have SE Demon here. Let's look at some concrete examples, all right? So you have, let's say they're at like a dinner gala of some kind, or or I don't know, a networking event of some kind. And it's really the ISTJ's job at that point to go around to all the people that the ESFP knows and speak very highly and share stories of the ESFP at that location, at this gala. Oh, I really love my ESFP. My ESFP did this for me. They did this for me. Oh, they're so smart, because what TE user wants to sound smart, right? So it's the ISTJ's job to make sure that the ESFP looks smart and sounds smart at the gala. That way, it comes back later through their friends, the ESFP's friends. Oh, your ISTJ is so awesome. They're always talking so highly of you. I wish I had a relationship like that, And it makes the ESFP feel really, really good, right? Because the ISTJ is talking them up, and talking them up all the time. All the time, right? Right? Super important, right? Another example, the other way around. What does the ESFP do, right? The ESFP goes around sharing experiences, always sharing things with the ISTJ, always bringing the ISTJ along, making sure that the ISTJ is always included, so that the ISTJ doesn't feel, unwanted, etc. So, such as giving the ISTJ, hey, you should come with me, we're going. The ISTJ says, great, I feel wanted, I'll go, right? Very, very simple. Very simple as a result in that direction. So the ESFP has conversations at the gala and starts talking to other people about the ISTJ and talking about the ISTJ's accomplishments, achievements, and the philosophy that the ISTJ, what the ISTJ is about, that allowed the ISTJ to make those accomplishments, right? The value system behind the ISTJ, where the ISTJ is being acknowledged for being a good person, an affiliative person, somebody who is supportive, somebody who is loyal, somebody who always sticks around, and somebody who always tries to do the right thing while making sure that everything is being done in a very responsible, educated way. Pretty fantastic. So these are just some concrete examples. Remember, look at the child functions, guys. Already sexually, everything's handled on the inferior functions and the hero functions. You're fine. But it's the child functions. The child function ends up having the higher need over the parent function. This means an ESFP needs credit and status, and needs praise in terms of credit in that regard. But the ISTJ needs praise, but praise about their value system, praise about them being a good person, right? Where the ESFP is telling other people about how the ISTJ is so consistent, very dutiful on handling everything, and very good at paperwork. And the ESFP admits they're not as good at paperwork. They're not as good at financial management as the ISTJ, which honestly may not necessarily be true within the context of the relationship due to human nurture. I mean, yeah, that's a thing, so it is possible that the ESFP could be better at financial management and paperwork. It is possible, but it's not very likely as a result. So just be aware of that. It is something that oftentimes people just aren't really aware of, within the context of their relationships. So as long as those needs are being met, it's all good. But here's the other thing, the ISTJ is like, oh, I think very highly of you to the ESFP, and the ESFP is like, oh, you're such a good person, and the ESFP is always trying to be very supportive to the ISTJ. Another example of where this is a big deal, ESFPs are starter types. They start a bunch of stuff, but they can't finish anything. Versus the ISTJ, they're finishers. They have a really hard time starting things. And oftentimes they get into like decision or analysis paralysis because they just have no clue where to start. At least the ESFP can start a bunch of things so that the ISTJ can finish them. And they can have an amazing shared experience where the ISTJ feels wanted, the ESFP ends up having the choice. Wow, base jumper just went off the bridge. They end up having the choice of being able to make sure, like choice is important, because then they get to choose what is being started, right? And then the ISTJ is like, okay, yeah, I should get in there, I should get involved, right? And that's another way that they could really link together within their relationship and then learn from one another. But while they are trying to meet their emotional needs with some of these little strategies that I've given you right now, you got to look at it differently too. Over time, the ISTJ will develop their shadow. It'll actually make them, because they're using their TI critic constantly to say things like, well, I think very highly of you. Because honestly, saying I feel this or I believe this to the ESFP isn't really going to mean that much. Conversely, it's not going to mean that much either. So, but the TI is still on the responsibility of the ISTJ. So the ISTJ has to provide the truth. It has to provide the facts. It has to be willing to do the research and do the verification and verify everything for the sake of their relationship. That way the ESFP can make correct decisions. But it's also up to the ESFP to make sure that the ISTJ has all the support that they need to be able to move forward. Because if the ISTJ doesn't have that support structure that they need, if they're not, if things aren't being shared with them, if they're being, forgotten about when they always remember the ESFP on a regular basis, and because the ISTJ, it's important that, they're both TE users, that they're top of mind. It's super important. It's just more important for the ESFP to be top of mind, because the only thoughtful person in the relationship, technically speaking, is the ISTJ. But the ESFP, as a result of that, needs to really prove with concrete action that they're very caring, that they're sentimental, willing to get flowers or do nice things and be super nice and do nice things and not really expect anything in return. And that's the thing about ESFPs, because they're so interest-based, and they can be like, oh, well, they can be very transactional with their relationships. SE heroes are all this way, and I inferiors all this way. They get super transactional with their relationships when they need to learn how to give to others without expecting to receive anything back whatsoever. That's a covert contract, technically, when your relationship becomes that transactional. And that's like their ISFJ shadow, Crusader shadow, coming out in covert contracting as a result. It's not fair to the ISTJ. It's not fair to anyone. So ESFPs, you guys have to learn how to not do that. So with that being said, make sure you're going out of your way to prove that you're caring. And it's not just with words. Both of these types, ESFPs, ISTJs, they're all about words. They're all about being wordy. They're all about fluffing up the other person, especially the ESFP, because TE Child is all about fluff and not so much substance. At least there's some substance to the ISTJ because of TI Critic, but there's not much substance to an ESFP. It's mostly phlegm, mostly fluff. So please be aware of that. And within your guys' relationship, it's like, okay, ESFP, you don't really have to know everything. And I know that you like to look like you know everything, especially the ISTJ too. They really like to know that they're know-it-alls and whatnot. And sometimes you might be intimidated by about how much they know, but that's okay. ESFPs, all you actually have to do within the relationship, it doesn't matter what you know. And if the ISTJ is taking on their role of being the TI user within the relationship, they're not supposed to care as much about what you know. Instead, they care about how caring you are. They want you to be caring. So be caring, ESFPs. You have to care. You really, really have to go out of your way to prove or to show that you care, and on a daily basis, right? And then as a result, the ISTJ will show gratitude to you, and you need to learn how to receive that gratitude, right, in a healthy way. The ISTJ will be grateful to you, and then you have to consistently show that you're caring. Because sometimes it's so easy for ESFPs to even forget about their significant other. And it's not, and I know that you ESFPs go out of your way to prioritize your significant other, but even your priorities sometimes don't include you caring because oftentimes you expect the other person in the relationship to be caring about you. And sure, the ISTJ cares about you, but the ISTJ, it's not their fault they have FE Trickster. It's not their fault that they don't know how to care about you. It's not their fault that it doesn't occur to them mentally how to specifically render you care personally. That's why it's your job to be the carer, the caregiver, basically, in the relationship. It's your job. Just like it's their job to be the researcher, the one who provides the thinking, or the person who verifies so that both of you have the specific facts. It's really important. And if you guys don't have that in a relationship, your guys' emotional needs will be never met, because then the ISTJ is not giving you, the ESFP, any credit, and you, the ESFP, are not making the ISTJ feel any better. They don't feel valuable. They don't. It's like it doesn't matter what they do, right? They want to be loyal to somebody who wants them, but they're not going to feel wanted if you're not respecting their value system. I get, like, it's interesting, like, you really have to go out of your way to listen to how the ISTJ feels, even if you disagree with how they feel, even if you have conflicting beliefs. It's so easy. And the same thing goes across the ISTJ. You have to make sure that you spend time listening to the beliefs of the ESFP the entire time, even if you don't believe what they believe. You have to ask them, how did they arrive to that conclusion? You have to ask them, hey, how did you come to that belief system? Walk me through what did you read? Or it's important to facilitate this communication. And you have to communicate in these ways. Otherwise, you'll just rely on cognitive projection to project your own communication style onto the other person, and your communication style is built for being received by a TIFE user, of which neither of you are. So that's just going to suck. So you have to listen. You have to listen to each other. Just because you're responsible with your value systems doesn't mean that you have a right to not listen to the childish value system of the ISTJ. Just because you're responsible with your belief system doesn't give you the right to ignore the childish belief system of the ESFP. You can't do that to one another. It's wrong. It's actually wrong. It will lead to a bad relationship. And that's bad. That's really bad. You're not going to get anywhere in your life. I don't care how good the sex is. Eventually, your relationship will fall apart because you're unable to meet each other's emotional needs, right? It's super important. So these are basically all of the strategies that you need to be aware of, that you need to follow as a result. And it's so interesting to me because, and take the ISTJ for example, they go out of their way. They go so out of their way to remove bias, and they're always the first people to complain about bias every single time, but they themselves are the most biased. But they have a hard time recognizing that fact. Well, they get so biased sometimes that they won't even listen to another person's belief system, albeit a TE child, because that's a childish belief system, right? They won't listen to that belief system, even though the ISTJ is likely carrying around bias themselves. It's kind of hypocritical. And hey, no one wants to be a hypocrite, right? No one really wants to be a hypocrite. But that's what happens. It actually happens. It sucks. It's a thing. I don't know why they do it. Actually, I do, but I mean, they're philosopher type, right? Philosopher types who think that, hey, just because I'm doing the right thing, that means I'm entitled to have authority because I'm doing the right thing. No. I don't care. Like, that belief is BS. That's not accurate. Conversely, with the ESFP, like, again, you guys get to this thing where you think that your value systems are so good that you don't even realize that your value system could be corrupt because you don't spend any time asking people what they think about your values. So oftentimes your value system can turn into kind of like an echo chamber because you're not going out there surveying people to find out if your value systems are good, because you're not willing to share or expose yourself to other people, because it's like you get afraid of doing it because you're afraid that they're going to take away your freedom of choice. I get it. But the thing is, your ISTJ already sacrifices so much for you. They're already so loyal to you. They're already sticking around for you. Why can't you just let go of your freedom of choice every now and then for the sake of verifying your own value system, therefore allowing yourself to listen to the childish value system of the ISTJ and actually consider temporarily adopting and trying their value system for a while to see if it actually works? You have to do this. You're pragmatic too, right? So why not? Why not? You're pragmatic, which means you're willing to go further. It means you're willing to take responsibility, right? But if you're not going to do that, well, then your relationship's going to fall apart. You don't want it to fall apart, trust me, okay? So yeah, these two types can have an amazing relationship. If also, for example, you get yourselves to a situation where you're having a great relationship, you have your emotional compatibilities handled because you're able to have these amazing habits. Based on that, it's super important that you always make sure to cycle in additional sexual intimacy. Don't forget about that. Don't neglect that. It's really important that you keep that fire stoked within your relationship. But beyond that, as you learn to use these emotional compatibility skills, these challenging things, adopting each other's value systems and belief systems, being open to being the caregiver versus being open to being the verifier within the relationship, at that point, you guys will be able to unlock a higher consciousness basically within yourself, because you'll be able to use your unconscious and make it conscious just to be able to use those mental skills to facilitate the success of your relationship. Your neural pathways will be developed. They'll be going through your cognitive gateways, and then as a result of your cognitive gateways, you guys would be able to cognitive transition in a much healthier way. You're being integrated with your psyches on a consistent basis, and then as a result of that integration, you will be much closer to enlightenment. Enlightenment, again, is defined by the four sides of the mind completely integrated and united and together. Whereas before then, throughout your life, from the time that you're born, oftentimes the four sides of the mind are disintegrated. And life is all about reintegrating them and becoming something more, right? This is literally what your lifespan, what personal growth is all about. And you can absolutely obtain that very easily if you utilize the Pedagogue relationship to help you to get there. So, pretty fantastic. So, ESFPs, go out of your way to give a good experience and make the ISTJ comfortable, make them feel wanted, super important. And then also make sure to listen to the value system of the ISTJ without shutting them down. ISTJs, go out of your way to be loyal and stick around, to be willing to stop everything you're doing for the ESFP. Also giving the ESFP options and choices and never take away their freedom of choice. But also being willing to adopt the belief system and the beliefs and try out the beliefs of the ESFP without shutting them down. That's a big one. And then being willing to verify those beliefs and experiment with those beliefs. Super, super mega important. And give credit to the ESFP. Increase the ESFP status. While the ESFP is more caring towards you. Super important. If both of you can do this, you guys will have a fantastic relationship, and it will be the best possible relationship you could have ever had. Probably even better than that of a golden pair. There's a really, really good chance of that. A really, really good opportunity for that. So always keep that in mind. Always remember that. So yeah. Anyway, folks, that's it for season 14, series 2. So season 14, episode 16. Episode 17, we'll be doing bronze pairs for that next episode. And also we have season 23, which is the How to Parent series, moving forward within the now new Journeyman membership tier. So happy to see you all here for that. And with all that being said, folks, I'll see you guys tonight.